I'm going to talk about something that I have not talked about for a while, and it's something that we do all the time in the dojo. We do it more than almost anything else, and it's not breathing, because we do that more. It's not meditation. We do this more often, at least, than meditation. It's bowing, and it's something that I think a lot of people just kind of, especially in other martial arts schools, just gloss over, like, well, this is just what we do, we bow. And we don't want it to be that way. And there are lots of different techniques for bowing. There are even several different bows that we do here in the dojo. And I want you guys to be very mindful of the way that we bow. And I'm going to start off with a little bit of this book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. If you guys haven't read it, it's an absolutely phenomenal book, and you're going to have to read it by your, was it Green Sash? Something like that. Catherine's squinting at me and nodding her head. Okay. So there's a chapter in this book called Bowing. And this is written by Shunryu Suzuki, and he's a very well-known Zen Buddhist from the Soto school. He says, after Zazen, we bow to the floor 9 times. By bowing, we are giving up ourselves. To give up ourselves means to give up our dualistic ideas. So there's no difference between Zazen practice and bowing. Usually to bow means to pay our respects to something which is more worthy of respect than ourselves. But when you bow to Buddha, you should have no idea of Buddha. You just become one with Buddha. You are already Buddha himself. When you become one with Buddha, one with everything that exists, you find the true meaning of being. When you forget all your dualistic ideas, everything becomes your teacher, and everything can be the object of worship. It's pretty serious. That's not what most people do when they bow. I've practiced in some martial arts schools where they don't bow at all. I've practiced in some schools where the bow is just like, that's it, and they go. And then in schools like ours, and like the Hombu Dojo, where there's a much more elaborate opening and closing ceremony, and you can tell people are actually paying attention to the bow. But then, even if you are doing a longer opening ceremony, or like this, they bow 9 times after doing Zazen meditation. Some people during that succession of bows are not really there present to like what they're doing and what it means, or what they choose to have it mean for themselves. They're just going through the motions. And so it's no longer a ritual, it just becomes like an empty habit. It's just what I do. And so when you have this understanding of bowing, and as he says, there's no separation between this and meditation. It's like the same, and it is really just a very deep, meaningful part of practice. If in that moment you can think of it like you're giving up yourself and you're really becoming one with everything, that's something that you'd pay attention to, isn't it? And he says, when everything exists within your big mind, all dualistic relationships drop away. When he's referring to with the big mind is we have the small mind, which is the ego and what we relate to ourselves and the world through, and then the big mind, which is when the ego melts away, and in that moment we are one. It's the big mind. There's no distinction between heaven and earth, man and woman, teacher and disciple. Sometimes a man bows to a woman, sometimes a woman bows to a man. Sometimes the disciple bows to the master, sometimes the master bows to the disciple. A master who cannot bow to his disciple cannot bow to Buddha. Sometimes the master and disciple bow together to Buddha. Sometimes we may bow to cats and dogs. In your big mind, everything has the same value. Everything is Buddha himself. You see something or hear a sound, and there you have everything just as it is. In your practice, you should accept everything as it is, giving to each thing the same respect given to a Buddha. Here there is Buddhahood, then Buddha bows to Buddha, and you bow to yourself. That is the true bow. So that's getting a little confusing. If you do not have this firm conviction of big mind in your practice, your bow will be dualistic, as in like separating. You don't have this sense of oneness in your bow. When you're just yourself, you bow to yourself in its true sense, and you are one with everything. Only when you are yourself, can you bow to everything in its true sense. Bowing is a very serious practice. You should be prepared to bow even in your last moment. When you cannot do anything except bow, you should do it. This kind of conviction is necessary. Bow with this spirit, and all the precepts, all the teachings are yours. You will possess everything within your big mind. So, the bows that we do, I'm going to come back to this in a second. The bows that we do are not the most complicated bows, but there are a few. You guys know that we have the bow when we're kneeling on the ground. And I was reading earlier today about the Japanese tea ceremony, and they have several different bows. The deepest bow, the most respectful bow, is the one from the student to the teacher, the disciple to the master, and that's the one that we do, where the hands are on the mats and the forehead comes down and actually touches the mats. And you notice that I do that same bow to you guys. I don't do like the lesser bow, and it's just because we're all, I guess, in it together. We're all bowing, and I'm showing you as much respect as you show me. Oftentimes I end up bowing for longer than you guys end up bowing. And then there are like lesser versions of the bow where the hands stay on the knees, but they slide down and just barely touch the mats. And when I look out at you guys when you're bowing, sometimes you bow correctly, and sometimes I see newer students, beginners, and they don't know how to bow. And that's okay, because they're brand new. But I see people, sometimes they have their hands on their thighs, sometimes they have their hands behind them. In kids' class, the kids are bowing and they're just like doing this with their hands the whole time, or like drumming on the mats. But the specific way to bow is to start with your hands on the thighs and then go left hand for peace, right hand, and then come back with the right hand leaving peace out and then bringing that in last. And I read something interesting today. So you guys know the standing bow that we do with the hand wrapping, the left hand covering the right hand. This is a fairly common bow. It's used mostly in Chinese styles, but it's also used in other styles as well. I'll read a little bit of what I saw. I'm not checking my text right now. I'm reading something off the internet. So this is called the bao quan, meaning fist wrapping. It's a common etiquette in Chinese martial arts and in others as well. So I love this person who wrote this article gave these two elaborate explanations for what all of this could mean. The first, he says, this is a traditional explanation: the left palm with its 4 fingers represent the 4 nurturing elements: virtue, wisdom, health, and art. These symbolize the spirit of martial arts. The left thumb is slightly bent to imply one should never be arrogant or self-centered. The right fist symbolizes rigorous practice. Since the right hand is clenched in a fist, it symbolizes attack, while the left, being virtuous and disciplined, stops the attack, symbolizing self-defense or self-discipline and restraint. And then the second explanation, he says, the left hand symbolizes the 5 major lakes of China, the fist representing the 4 seas surrounding China. The 2 hands together show the unity of martial arts. This is exemplified in this saying that I'm not going to try to say because I don't speak Chinese, which means the people of the 5 lakes and the 4 seas are all brothers. And then there's a whole lot else. But I on one hand, I love this idea of like, oh my God, there's this huge story behind the bow. There's so much to it. And it's like, if you're literally thinking about all that stuff, I got 4 lakes and 5 lakes and 4 oceans, and all of us are brothers, like with your bow, and you're actually imagining all of that. It's great. And there's also this beauty in simplicity, right? So I really like the symbolism behind our bow, which is also a really common explanation for the way that we bow, which is the right hand symbolizes war, the left hand symbolizes peace, and peace covers war. And some people bow this way with the hands open, some people bow like this with it completely covered. What we don't do is smash peace with war. Some people do that. Don't do that. You're supposed to gently smother war with peace and bow with your eyes up like this on your partner. You guys know that the depth of the bow has something to do with the amount of respect that you show. So if you're just doing this, which is what some people do, that's not a very respectful bow. And then some people get way down low, which is a very respectful bow. Just don't fall over. I remember a student back in Michigan at Seafood Brown School, Dennis, and he would come up to the mats to bow on to practice, and he would stand here like this, and his eyes are closed, and he's visualizing, or I don't actually know what he was doing, but he was standing there like this, and he would stand there for like a minute, and all these other people would come up and bow and pass him on the mats, and he'd be standing there, and I loved it. And like, I can't do that because I bow on and off the mats about 100 times every day, so that all I would be doing would be bowing. But I love like the reverence that he was showing with his bow, and yet it doesn't have to be an obscenely long bow to show reverence and to show respect. But it is one way, and the lower the bow, or the longer the bow is held, that's traditionally what that means. But it's really about your mindset. And it's one of the reasons why when I see beginners in class and they don't know how to bow, I'm not going to like yell at them and get upset about it. I had somebody in here in class a couple of weeks ago. At the end of class, I was talking and everyone was sitting up very nicely, paying attention like you guys. And then there was one person over there in for his first class, and he's like laying on the ground, like like just about to take a nap. And I'm talking and I'm like saying some great stuff, and he's just like, just and when I saw that, I just thought, oh, he just doesn't know, he's new. And I suggest to you that there are things that we do in the dojo outside of technique, which I think most of you know you suck at and you're new at. But then there's all the other stuff too, like etiquette, like the way that we bow, that you might want to revisit and ask yourself, am I really doing this the way that I want to? And that kind of question, that kind of mindset is key, because the strong etiquette comes from a strong desire to show respect and to be respectful of your practice and everyone else around you, and to just be completely in the moment and be the best student that you can be. If you have that kind of mindset and desire, then your etiquette will, within the first couple of weeks or months, become very strong and very correct. And it's simply done by asking questions and watching what everybody else does, the senior students who have been here for a while, because you can't be here for a long time without learning how to bow. Either you soak it up through osmosis, or I beat it into you. But the whole idea of bowing is just something that's so often overlooked. And so I love what Suzuki says when he's talking about bowing being no different from like our meditation practice. And really in that moment, it is letting yourself go and being absorbed into your big mind. I also really like the analogy that Leah mentioned a couple of weeks ago, which is, what did you say, ma'am? You bow low because water, like wisdom, flows from high to low, right? Tomoko? Oh, Tomoko said that? Oh. I know the difference between you and Tomoko. What did you say?
I was quoting the Tao my water is the highest.
Okay. And it flows from okay, got it. So you said something about this. So yeah, there's all this symbolism behind the bow. There was something that I read that said there's and I forget what it was. It's like a bamboo stick that's holding the most rice bends the most. And so if you have the most wisdom, you're also the most humble. and people who are very arrogant and don't bow and don't care to show respect to other people, they don't really get it. They're not getting it. Sifu Donahue in Michigan used to say this about people who didn't understand why we clean the mats after practice. And, we have this conversation with students, and sometimes they're still like, I don't want to clean. Like, I don't get it. And he used to say, they don't get it, and they don't get it. Like, they just are not even interested in trying to understand the etiquette behind why we do what we do in the dojo. And those people don't usually stay for very long because they don't get it. So, a quick story. His teacher had a callus on his forehead from bowing. I have a callus on my foot from pivoting. I have a little callus on my hand from punching. Callus on your forehead from bowing. He knew he was an obstinate, stubborn fellow, and so he bowed and bowed and bowed. The reason he bowed was that inside himself he always heard his master's scolding voice. He had joined the Soto order when he was 30, which for a Japanese priest is rather late. When we are young, we are less stubborn. I don't know if that's necessarily true. And it's easier to get rid of your selfishness. So his master always called my teacher, "You lately joined fellow," and scolded him for joining so late. Actually, his master loved him for his stubborn character. And when my teacher was 70, he said, "When I was young, I was like a tiger, but now I'm like a cat." He was very pleased to be like a cat. That's where we'll finish with this. So, the main point, I guess, that I want you to think about is, what is bowing to you? Why do you bow? Not why do I tell you you bow, but why do you bow? And why do you practice martial arts, and why do you meditate? And what is it that you're thinking about when you bow? What is it that you should not be thinking about when you bow? And are you actually in that moment making it something more meaningful and powerful than I'm just doing this because this is what we do every day? And I'll tell you, when you bow repeatedly, as I do, I bow, like I said, about 100 times a day, and I've been doing that just in this style alone for 16, 17 years now. It becomes very easy to lose sight of what it is you're doing. Just like when you throw a front punch. I've thrown a fair number of front punches, and it becomes so natural to just do it without thinking, without being present, without really, knowing what it means to me. And so I'm constantly coming back to, why am I doing this? Am I actually doing this the way that I want to do it? How am I doing it? Am I in the moment? And when you meditate, it can have a tendency to be the same thing. If you meditate repeatedly, and some of you are not there yet, but let's pretend you meditate every day, consistently, sometimes several times a day, you can start to get into that same kind of mindset of like, this is just what I do. And that's a great place to get to, because it means that you have a consistent practice. But then you also have to get beyond that. And in that moment, I'm not just meditating because it's just what I do. I'm meditating because of, this is the place that I want to get to, or this is the meaning behind my practice, and sit with that intention, and then let it go. And then just sit. So that's what we're going to do right now. Sit comfortably.